there friends, it's Ashley here from the Loopy Lamb and theloopylamb.com, and thanks so much for stopping by the channel. In today's tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to make my Octo Ollie. He is a no-sew crochet mini octopus pattern, and the pattern works up super quickly, and I'm averaging about 15 to 20 minutes to make one of these little guys. Now, the toy, when it's crocheted to gauge, measures approximately 1.25 inches tall by 1 3/4 inches wide. All right, so we'll talk about gauge and how that plays a factor in a second. But first, let's jump into what materials you'll need to follow along with today's tutorial. So I'm using this Amigurumi Nilly Nilly yarn from Universal Yarns for my toys. Now, the Amigurumi yarn is really great. It's a plush yarn, but made at a smaller yarn weight than most plush yarns. This is a DK or size 3 weight yarn. And for my samples here, I use the light blue, which is number 14, and the just blue, and which is number 13 for my samples here. Now, when I'm crocheting in the actual tutorial, I'm going to be using a different yarn because I find that with the plush yarns, it's harder for you folks to see while I'm crocheting. So I am going to be using a different yarn, but this is the actual yarn that's used in the sample and the recommended yarn for the pattern. You're going to need a 3.25 millimeter or D crochet hook. You're going to need some stuffing, a pair of scissors, a yarn or tapestry needle, 1 stitch marker, and a piece of scrap yarn for when we get to our safety eye placement. And you're going to need 2 6 millimeter safety eyes. And I'm just using the regular black safety eyes for my toys. All right, so let's quickly talk about the gauge for the pattern. It's not vital, but it will affect the size of your toy. And let's show how here quickly how it affects your toy. This is the first sample I made, and this is the second one where I didn't check my gauge. And you can see that he is much larger than the original. Again, not a huge deal, but if you want to be consistent and you're making toys for, let's say, markets, and you want them all to be around the same size, I think checking your gauge is ideal because it will help you stick or have your toys all be the same size. Now, the gauge for this pattern is when you finish rounds 1 to 3, you'll measure across the widest point and it will measure 1 inch. And I will show you that when we get to there. So let me clear off my workspace here, and we're going to jump on in to crocheting our no-sew mini octopus. All right, to start our octopus, we're going to start with a magic circle. Now, I'm going to do this relatively quickly, but if you need to see a slower version of this done, you can check out this tutorial here where I show you how to do this much slower. And just a reminder that I am using a different yarn than the recommended yarn for this tutorial, just to help it make it easier for you to see what we're doing. All right, so we're going to start our magic circle. We've got our yarn tail laying across the palm. Then we're going to wrap our fingers around the back, cross it over, and then flip over our hand. And then we're going to pin that yarn working end down between our ring finger and our pinky finger, inserting our hook under the first strand, over the second, and then we're going to pull that second strand out and under the first. Then we're going to give that a little twist. You want to make sure you've got that cross here in the yarn. Then we'll yarn over with the working end and pull that through the loop on our hook. Then you can remove the yarn from your fingers, pull out the yarn tail from the ring, and you're ready to start working. And again, if you need that slower, check out the tutorial for the magic circle here on the channel, or you can also slow down the speed of this tutorial with the YouTube settings here on the bottom of the screen. All right, so starting round 1, we're going to work 6 single crochets into the magic circle. And we want to make sure that we're working over this yarn tail here, so that way we can cinch the magic circle closed at the end. So we're going to insert our hook into the ring here, making sure that we're under both the yarn tail and the magic rings yarn here, yarning over and pulling up a loop. You should have 2 loops on your hook. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through both loops. And that is our first single crochet completed. So I'll show you that again. Back into the magic circle, yarn over and pull up a loop. We've got 2 loops on our hook. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through both loops. There's our second single crochet, and we'll do this one more time slowly together. Back into the ring, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. And that's our 3 single crochets completed. Now we need to do 3 more to get our total of 6. So now I've got my 6 stitches. If you want to double check your count, turn your work so you've got these V's facing you, and make sure that you find that very first one here. It tends to kind of want to hide on you, and you're just going to count from one end to the other. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the loop on your hook never counts as a stitch. So now that we've got our 6 single crochets, we can close our magic circle. We're going to grab onto the yarn tail and give that a tug to cinch the ring closed. So this is the end of round 1. You should have your 6 single crochet stitches, and you're going to need your stitch marker in just a moment, so have that handy. So moving into round 2, the instructions say that we're going to work 2 single crochets or a single crochet increase into each stitch around. So we're going to work that first stitch by inserting our hook under both loops of that first stitch. Now that first stitch might be a little tight, and that's okay. Just use your patience there and you'll be okay. Then we're going to single crochet twice into the same stitch. So we've got our first single crochet, grabbing my stitch marker, and then I'm going to insert my stitch marker under both loops of that stitch I just created. And when we work in a continuous spiral, we're going to continue to move this stitch marker up to mark the first stitch of every round. So I've done 1 single crochet, and I'm going back into that same first stitch to do my second single crochet. And that's your first single crochet increase completed. And we're going to do this in each stitch around. So we'll do this one more time together. Under both loops of the next stitch, single crochet once, back into the same stitch, and single crochet a second time. So you're going to do this 2 single crochets or a single crochet increase into each stitch around, and at the end of the round you should have 12 single crochets. So if you'd like to pause your video and do that now, I'll meet you back here at the end of the round. So we're moving into round 3. I'm going to move that stitch marker out of the first stitch, and we're going to do a pattern repeat 6 times around this round. And that pattern repeat is 1 single crochet in the first stitch and an increase into the next. So we'll start this together. We'll work 1 single crochet into that first stitch, and then we're going to move up our stitch marker. And then we're going to work a single crochet increase into the next stitch. So again, that's 2 single crochets worked into the same stitch. And so that's our first pattern repeat completed. And if you're following along with the written version with the video, then this is your pattern repeat. 1 single crochet followed by a single crochet increase into the next stitch. So we'll do this one more time together. 1 single crochet into the first stitch and a single crochet increase into the next. So that's our second pattern repeat completed. We need to do this 4 more times. So if you'd like to pause your video and do that repeat of 1 single crochet into the first stitch, single crochet increase into the next, repeat that a total of 4 more times. And at the end of this round, you should have 18 stitches. I'll meet you back here in just a moment. So we just finished the end of round 3, and at the end of round 3, you should have 18 stitches around your piece. Now, if you're wanting to match the gauge given in the pattern, either because you want to make sure you don't run out of yarn or you want your toys to be all the same size, this is where you're going to pause and check your gauge. Now, at this point, if I was using the same yarn and wanted to match gauge, I would measure from front loop to front loop across the widest part of the piece, and it should measure 1 inch. Now, I'm using a much heavier weight yarn, and my measurement from front loop to front loop is 1.25 inches. So this is going to be a little bit bigger than the initial toy, but it should be 1 inch if you're wanting to match that gauge. All right, so let's hop on into round 4. So for rounds 4 through 8, we're just going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch around, but we want to mark where our safety eyes are going to go in round 4. So work 1 single crochet into each stitch around, and then meet me back here at the end of round 4, and I'll show you where we're going to put markers for our safety eyes. All right, I'll see you in just a moment. All right, so I just finished round 4. We still have 18 stitches at the end of the round, but we're going to need to put in a marker for our safety eyes, because once we can't put our safety eyes in the round right after we do it, because if we do, we won't be able to crochet into those stitches. So we need to use a scrap piece of yarn to mark those stitches. So I've just got a piece of random yarn here, and we're going to put the safety eyes in round 4 with 3 stitches between them. So I'm just going to pick any stitch here. Doesn't really matter. And I'm going to pull the scrap yarn from the back to the front through one of the stitches. And then we're going to count over 3 stitches. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to bring the other end of the yarn through that 4th stitch. So again, from front to back, inserting my hook and then picking up that yarn tail and pulling it through. All right, so this is what we've got here. If it's long enough, I like to just tie a little, not even a knot, like a half bow, let's call it. I like to cross the yarn over just so it has a little bit more resistance, so it's less likely to fall out on me. And before we go on, I just want to show you quickly, because some folks do struggle with this point, the right side versus the wrong side. So when you're working with amigurumi, it's ideal if you're working with the right side facing you. This here is my right side, and let's flip this to the inside, and this is the wrong side. You can tell the wrong side of the fabric when you see these little bars in your stitches. That's the wrong side of the single crochet stitch. So we want that to be on the inside of our fabric. Now, before we keep going, I would recommend either weaving this yarn end in, or if you would prefer, you can tie a couple of knots in that yarn tail as close to the fabric as you can, because it's just going to all sit inside the toy anyways. So I like to take a moment here, tie a couple of knots, and then we'll move on. All right, so I've got my knots in there. I'm confident it is secure. And then we're going to keep moving. For rounds 5 through 8, we're just going to work 1 single crochet into each stitch around. So don't forget to move your stitch marker up when you get to the first stitch of each round. And if you'd like to pause your video and do rounds 5 through 8, I'll meet you back here in just a moment to show you what we'll be doing in round 9. All right, so I'm back. I just finished rounds 5 through 8, and we still have the same stitch count, but we're going to need to take a break here to insert our safety eyes. So I'm using these little 12mm safety eyes for this size that I'm doing. But again, in the original sample here, we're using 6mm eyes. So I'm just going to insert the stem of the safety eye through the front of the fabric, the right side, where I have my stitch marker, and insert the first here, then insert the second in where the other stitch marker is, and we've got our little eyes in there. Then I like to turn my fabric inside out. And what I do is I use my fingers to hold the safety eyes from the right side of the fabric, which helps to put the safety eyes in, but also helps to keep them from falling out. So I'm going to pull the stitch marker out, and then I'm going to put the backs on my safety eyes. Now these ones are a little flatter than some of the others you might see. You might see this type where it's more of a cup shape. If you have a cup shape one, you want the cup to be facing the back of the safety eye or the wrong side of the fabric. Okay, so same with these flat ones. Again, it has a teeny tiny little bit of a cup at the top. You can kind of see it here. And again, we want that to be the cup to be facing the back of the safety eye. So we'll put these on here. And there we go. I always love how weird they look when you just have the backs there. All right, so we've got our safety eyes in place and we're ready to keep going. So working into round 9, we're going to start decreasing. Now moving that safety stitch marker out of the way here, and we're going to do a pattern repeat 6 times around our piece, and we're going to start with 1 single crochet in the first stitch, and then we're going to decrease over the next 2 stitches. So let's do that together. So working 1 single crochet into that first stitch, moving up our stitch marker, and then we're going to do a single crochet decrease. When we do amigurumi, it's always advised that we do what's called an invisible decrease. So to do that, we're going to insert our hook up and under the front loop only of the first stitch. All right. And just to show you, if you're not familiar with front loop versus back loop, take a look at the top of your stitches. You can see that there are 2 loops. The loop furthest from you here is the back loop, and the one closest is the front loop. So when we're doing the invisible decrease, we're inserting our hook up and under that front loop only, then twisting our hook a little bit to pick up the front loop only of the next stitch. Then we're going to yarn over and pull up a loop, and yarn over and pull through 2. So it's like doing a single crochet through the front loops only of those 2 stitches. Sometimes in my head, that's how I think about it instead of thinking about it as a decrease. So that's our pattern: 1 single crochet into the first stitch, decrease over the next 2 stitches there. So we're going to do that 5 more times because we're looking for a total of 6 repeats. So 1 single crochet into the first stitch here, and then a single crochet decrease. So again, up and under the front loops of the first and second stitch, then yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and that's our decrease. We'll do this one more time together. 1 single crochet into the first stitch, and then a single crochet decrease. So up and under the front loops of the first and second stitch, then yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through both loops. And that's your decrease completed. So we need to do this 3 more times. And at the end of this round, we should have 12 single crochet stitches. So if you'd like to finish those repeats, again, 1 single crochet in the first stitch, single crochet decrease over the next 2 stitches. I'll meet you back here at the end of the round to show you what we're moving into next. All right, so I just finished my last stitch of round 9, and we're going to stop here to start stuffing our toy. When we're doing our stuffing, I recommend taking your stuffing and fluffing up the pieces with your fingers like this, and you want to work with small amounts at any time because you want to layer them inside your toy. That will give you the most even stuff possible. So we're just going to keep adding these little bits of stuffing into the toy. Now, if you find that the stuffing is kind of moving the eyes around, then try to fit your finger between the posts of the safety eyes and add some stuffing between the posts, which will help to keep them in place. While you're stuffing the toy, you want to be feeling around inside the toy for any sort of air pockets or areas where there is no stuffing, so that way you can add some stuffing to that. A properly stuffed toy should feel like a firm, ripe orange. So it should not be too soft, because if it is, the toy won't have as much time for it to be played with as possible, because the stuffing does break down over time. All right, so I think this is good for now. And now we're going to move into round 10. Round 10 is where we're going to start creating our tentacles. So we're going to move this stitch marker out of the way, and we're going to work the first stitch. It is a front loop only single crochet. So just like we did with our decrease, we're going to insert up and under the front loop only of that first stitch, and then we'll single crochet as normal. Then we're going to move up our stitch marker here and place it into that stitch. Then we're going to do a chain of 6. So we're going to yarn over and pull through the loop. There's 1. Yarn over and pull through. There's 2. 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now this is how long our tentacle will be. If you would like it to be longer or shorter, you will need to adjust the number of chains that you use here. So starting in the second chain from the hook, remembering that the yarn on our hook never counts as a chain or a stitch, we're going to single crochet into the second chain from the hook. So this chain here, inserting through the middle of the chain. Make sure that you're picking up 2 loops when you insert through the chain. Yarn over, pull up a loop. Yarn over, pull through 2. And we're just going to work 1 single crochet into each of these chains that we created. So into the next chain and single crochet. Into the next chain and single crochet. So now that I've done a single crochet in each of my chains, I should have 5 single crochets there. And we're going to be working back into the stitches we created in round 9. So we are going to do a front loop only single crochet decrease. So again, up and under the front loops of the first and second stitch, and then single crochet to complete our decrease. And now we're going to create our next tentacle. So yarn over and chain 6. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Turning, so you're working back down the chain, we're going to single crochet starting in the second chain from the hook. So again, 1, 2, inserting into that chain and single crochet. And we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of those chains that we created. So now we're going to work back into the next stitch of round 9 here, and we're working a front loop only single crochet. And now we're going to create our next tentacle. So we're going to do another chain of 6. Turning our work, so we're working back down the chain, starting in the second chain from the hook here, we're going to work a single crochet. And then we're going to work 1 single crochet into each of those remaining chains, back towards the body of the octopus. Now, working back into the stitches that we created in round 9, we're going to do a front loop only single crochet decrease over these next 2 stitches. And so far we have 3 legs created. All right, so now that I've done that single crochet decrease back into round 9 here, we're going to do another tentacle. So we're going to chain 6. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So again, we're repeating what we've done for every tentacle, returning, and we're going to work back down the chain. Starting in the second chain, we're going to start single crocheting into each chain. So here's 1, and 5 here. So now we're going to work back into the next stitch of round 9, and we're going to work a single crochet in the front loop only of that stitch. And now we're going to create our next tentacle. So again, chain 6. Working in the second chain from the hook, we're going to work a single crochet. And we're going to work 1 single crochet into each chain, working back towards the body. So now we're looking back at the stitches in round 9, and we're going to do a front loop only single crochet decrease in round 9 here. And we're going to create another tentacle. So yarn over and chain up 6. Now that we've got our chain of 6 turning, and we're starting in the second chain from the hook here, we're going to work a single crochet in the second chain from the hook, and each chain leading back to the body. All right, so we're back looking at the stitches here in round 9, and we're going to do a front loop only single crochet in the next available stitch here of round 9. And then we're creating another tentacle. So we're going to yarn over and chain up 6. And then we're going to turn and single crochet in the second chain from the hook. And then we're working 1 single crochet into each remaining chain. So at this point we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tentacles, and we're looking back at the stitches here in round 9, and we're going to do a front loop only single crochet decrease. So up and under those front loops, and then single crochet to decrease, and then we're creating the last tentacle. So we're going to do another chain of 6, then turning to work back down the chain, we're going to single crochet in the second chain from the hook, and each chain leading back to the body of the octopus. So here we're going to join our last stitch to our first stitch with a slip stitch. So I'm going to pull that stitch marker out of that stitch just to make it easier to work into. But because that stitch is hard to see, I'm going to keep a finger right next to it so I don't lose it. So inserting my hook in under both loops of that first stitch, we're going to yarn over and pull up a loop. You should have 2 loops on your hook. Then you're going to pull that first loop through the second loop on your hook. Then you're ready to cut your yarn. I'm going to cut a tail of at least 6 to 8 inches. I tend to go longer if I'm unsure, because you can always get rid of the extra, but you can't add more. So cutting my yarn tail, an extra long yarn tail here, and then we're going to use our crochet hook to pull that yarn tail all the way through our last stitch. Then I'm going to give that yarn a little tug so I know that it is secure. Then we're going to need our tapestry needle. So now I'm going to thread my yarn tail onto my tapestry needle. And so when we have our yarn tail on our tapestry needle, we're going to take our needle and insert it under both loops of the very first stitch. So that should be a little easier to see because you can see that we've got our slip stitch worked into that stitch here. And I'm going to put my yarn needle through and under that stitch to pull my yarn tail to the inside of my piece. Okay, and that helps to get that leg perfectly in line with the others and sets us up for our next step. So we're going to be closing up our toy here, and this is what your toy should look like. If these loops here that were unworked from our last row are hard for you to see, just do the best that you can and take your best guess, because it's the underside of the toy and it's not a huge deal if it's not perfect. So I'm going to take a moment here to just add a little bit more stuffing into my octopus, because once he's closed up, we can't add any more. All right, so feel like that is good there. And then we're going to take our yarn tail. Let's get it so we can see it here. And we're going to find the unworked back loops from the last round. And again, if you can't see it, not a big deal. For me, I have to kind of pull my first leg out of the way for me to see those first few loops. So I'm going to just pick up each loop with my yarn tail and my tapestry needle and work my way around. You want to work in the same direction through each of those loops, because that will make it easier for you to cinch your toy closed. All right, so now that I've worked through all the front loops that I could see there, I'm going to gently pull that yarn tail to cinch the hole closed. Now you might need to put some pressure on the toy to get that through, depending on whether or not you're like me and got stuffing in your loops, or if your yarn tends to break while you pull it. So that's as far as I'm going to be able to cinch mine, because I got far too much stuffing inside my yarn tail as I was going around, but that's okay. If you are having this experience as well, that's totally fine. Again, it's great when these things happen on camera so I can show you what to do. So I've cinched it as close as I can. There is a tiny little hole there, which again, not a big deal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my yarn tail to just add a couple of extra stitches in there to help close it up. Just that little bit more. All right, so now that that's properly closed, I can weave in my ends. So I'm just going to pull this to the other side of my toy, and I'm going to go in through that hole that I came through in the toy, find another hole in a stitch somewhere else and pull that through, because this will also help me to pull that a little tighter. See, there you go, nice and closed. So now that I've done that, I'm going to tie some knots into my yarn tail. I like to get those as close as I can to the actual fabric of my toy. I'm going to do 2 knots on top of each other for this one. And then I'm going to insert my needle back into the same stitch I came out of and insert it through the toy and bring it out somewhere else in the toy. We want to make sure that when we do pull it out, we're coming out another hole in the toy, not through the yarn, so that way it's easier for us to continue weaving in our ends. So I'm going to pull that all the way through, and I want to pull that knot inside the fabric. Now, if you get a slight indent like I've got here, take your needle, put it in through the stitch directly next to where the indent is, and use the tip of your needle to pull that up. And then you're good to go. So I'm going to repeat this process a few times, doing this double knotting and pulling it through my toy. If you're giving this to a child, I recommend doing this as much as you're willing to do, because kids can be rough on them, and the more you weave it in, the more longevity your toy will have. So going back into the toy a few more times is what I'd recommend. So I've done it twice. This guy's going to sit on my shelf. I'm not too concerned about it. So this is my little octopus, and I'm going to cut my yarn tail here by giving that yarn tail a tug, bringing in my scissors and cutting the tail as close to the fabric as I can. If you have any yarn sticking out, use your scissors or your tapestry needle to just kind of tuck that in. There we go. And you're all set. And that's it. That's how you make my Octo Ollie mini no-sew crochet octopus. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please hit that like button and please consider subscribing to this channel. If you like free crochet patterns, check out my blog, theloopylamb.com, where I've got over 200 free crochet patterns and counting, many of which have step-by-step video tutorials just like this one. Thanks so much for watching, friends. Happy hooking, and I'll see you next time.